A few months back, I made a video about buying a crypto mining RTX 3070. In the previous video, I paired the RTX 3070 with the Ryzen 7 2700X, and today I wanted to explore how much the CPU was holding back the 3070. Recently, I was able to get my hands on a Ryzen 7 5800X 3D for a really good price, so I wanted to explore what kind of performance difference I would get using this instead of the 2700X. This won't be the most scientific comparison, as I don't have the 2700X to retest with, but using the previous benchmarks, I think it should give us a pretty good idea. So these are the test systems that I have. The original build included an MSI B450 Gaming Plus motherboard, a Ryzen 7 2700X, 32 gigs of DDR4, 3200 CL18 RAM, the RTX 3070 of course, and then the games running on a Samsung 870 Evo SSD. The new build is very similar with an Asrock B450 Pro 4 motherboard, the Ryzen 7 5800X 3D, 32 gigabytes of 4000 CL20 RAM, the RTX 3070 once again, and then also the games running on the 870 Evo for the most part. There might be one that's on a different SSD. So there definitely are some differences. The CPU, motherboard, RAM speed differences. Once again, not the most scientific comparison, but a comparison that I'm curious about. Originally, the games were tested on the Ryzen 7 2700X at 1080p high settings. So we're going to be doing the same for the Ryzen 5 5800X 3D. In Apex Legends, there was a smaller gap than I was expecting. With the 5800X 3D and RTX 3070, the average sat at around 225 with 1% lows in the 160s. This was about 25 FPS faster than the 2700X, so about an 11% difference. The 1% lows, on the other hand, were maybe 10 FPS higher on the 5800X 3D. Considering that the game ran pretty well to begin with, it's not anything to complain about. I just thought it would be faster in general. For the last test, I tested Overwatch 1, but that's no longer available, so we have Overwatch 2 to compare with now. RIP Overwatch 1, and I guess actually Overwatch 2 as well, for that matter. Anyways, on Epic settings, the 5800X 3D and RTX 3070 ran the game with an average sitting in the 210s, with 1% lows in the 160s, the 170s. This was about 20 FPS higher on the average FPS compared to when using the Ryzen 7 2700X. As for the 1% lows, there was about a 40 FPS bump, so a good 25% increase. For Hunt Showdown, I saw some pretty decent performance improvements, and this game is one that I've been playing a lot, so I really wanted to see improvements in this the most. On the 5800X 3D, I saw the average FPS sit in about the 160s, with 1% lows that mostly sat in the 90s, but some of the games are a bit variable. One game I had started around 40 FPS for the 1% lows and then gradually increased throughout the game until it was about at 90. Another game I had it never dip below 100, so it can be a bit variable. As for the Ryzen 7 2700X with the RTX 3070, I saw the average FPS sit around 110 FPS, with 1% lows sitting around those 60s. So there was a decent improvement here as well. In Fortnite, on high settings with the render scale set to 100%, I saw a new average in the 180s with 1% lows that sat in the 100s with the 5800X 3D. On the 2700X, on the other hand, the average sat in the 120s with 1% lows around 60 to 70 FPS. While this was a decent difference, I still felt like it was slower than I was expecting. I will note that Fortnite still has some stutters for me at the beginning of games when dropping in. Kind of seems like no matter what type of PC or hardware I have, this is always going to be an issue for me, but that's okay. If any of the tests are accurate or scientific, it'll probably be the Far Cry 6 benchmark, and that's because I just ran the in-game benchmark rather than going into random maps and whatnot to test. So with the 5800X 3D, I saw an average of 139 FPS, with the minimum FPS being 108. Both of these numbers were more than double the performance of the 2700X and 3070 combo. Previously, with that hardware, I saw an average of 64 FPS and then a minimum frame rate of 48 FPS. So a really big difference here. So that's fairly interesting to look at, but what I really care about is how the games run on the settings that I actually use. I'm all about low settings. I mostly care about getting the highest FPS possible and having the smoothest possible experience. I'm not sure why I care so much because I don't think it actually makes a difference in my competitiveness, but I still want those frames though. So because of this, I also want to test all the games at 1080p, but on low settings. Unfortunately, I don't have any numbers for the Ryzen 7 2700X, so this is more just to kind of see how many frames the 5800X 3D can push in general. Apex Legends jumped up to an average that sat in the 290s with 1% lows in the 210s. Definitely a decent improvement, especially in the 1% lows. Overwatch kind of blew my mind. The average hit the 500s with 1% lows around 290, 300. I kind of wish every game ran this well. Just cap your FPS at 240, you barely hear your PC fans running, and call it a day. The average for Hunt Showdown jumped up to the 220s to 250s with 1% lows that were pretty variable. Sometimes they were in the 120s, other times in the 160s. I think some of the maps are more optimized than others, so I think that plays into it. In Fortnite, on low settings with the view distance set to far, I saw an average of 255 with 1% lows in the low 100s to the 130s. This is another one of those situations where I was expecting it to be a bit higher, but I guess I could test out performance mode and see what happens. Lastly, for the Far Cry 6 benchmark, on the low preset, it averaged 173 FPS with a minimum of 138. I think this might be one of those games that I would actually probably stick to high settings on, just because it's not exactly a competitive FPS. It's more of a open world game, but I would definitely mess around with it, see what I like. Anyways, that was kind of a fun test. The 5800X 3D is kind of a beast. The Ryzen 7 2700X, if you're playing at something like 1440p, probably get you by pretty well also, if you don't really care about super high FPS. Anyways, that's what I've got for today. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to do all the things, like, comment, subscribe, but no pressure. Do whatever you want, and I'll see you next time.